name is Tamara. I'm participating from the Bronx. But my home is Puerto Rico, and I'm part of the diaspora that migrated, that's continuously migrated because of the colonial status of Puerto Rico to the US from the get-go, from 1898 on. And so I share that because my experience in New York, in the Bronx, as a public health educator and community activist is very much grounded on what I call the air bridge. Basically, between Puerto Rico and New York City and the constant migration. So when COVID-19 hit, as a migrant, I immediately thought of my family. How am I gonna see them? When am I gonna see them? What does it mean to be so far away from them geographically? And then also with my parents being elders, both in Puerto Rico, that's where my mom is, and my father who splits his time between Puerto Rico and the Washington, D.C. metro area. And I'm the oldest of 6 siblings. So, you know, so for me it was like, and I'm the only one in New York. So for me it was like COVID-19 for me meant there is now a barrier, a viral barrier for me to be able to geographically see my family. And how am I going to survive this? Not in terms of getting sick, but in terms of the emotional care that the family contributes. I always say I go to Puerto Rico to recharge batteries in order to be able to be here. And so what does it mean that that gets disrupted when literally my solar love is no longer something I can tap into as often as I used to? And so a couple of things is one, I started to document the personal, what it meant to be on WhatsApp video calls, on Zoom video calls, on Hangout meetups. The screenshot while I was literally on the phone with my niece or with my nephew or with my dad or with my siblings became like the immediate documenting of my life under COVID-19. And so it also became not just about documenting, but then also being able to remember that love and that physicality of my family, which is what, as I said earlier, it is the battery, it is the love, it is what keeps me going while I live on the mainland. So yeah, so that was kind of like the personal in terms of the family connection from afar. The other piece of it was, how do I document what it's like in New York City? And in New York City, I have my chosen family, right? And so part of it is living in a community where there are elders. So I started to document what was the interaction like with Laura, who's the caretaker of the building. She gave birth to 4 children in this building. And it's somebody who I connect with since I moved here. About 10 years ago. It's a very small building in the Little Italy area of the Bronx. There's only 8 units. We all really know each other. And Laura, when I moved in, you see that red door at the bottom? That was the frequent weekly check-in. Laura, how are you? Here's some oranges. Laura, how you doing? And she would give me a gift. And as soon as COVID-19 hit, this door became like a danger zone. And it was like, how do I pass by that door quickly that I protect her? I protect this elder who is part of my chosen family in New York City. And so I actually took this picture very early on. I think it was the second day when we were sheltering at home, quarantine, and it's actually a little bit open. And usually when the door was open, I would knock and be like, hi, how are you? I'm here. And we would briefly touch base. And that was the first time seeing it open and noticing, acknowledging that I couldn't knock, that I couldn't peer in, that we actually couldn't have a conversation in the door. And so it was a really strong moment of acknowledging the loss. And so since then, I literally think this was the second day of really being intentional around the quarantine and documenting it. Since then, I have taken a picture every single day, multiple pictures, but at least one. Whether I stay in the house or whether I'm walking the street, or whether I'm in the supermarket in a line, or whether I am on a video call, as I said earlier, with the family. But for me, it's been, well, one, there was a transition from winter to spring, right? So even though we as humankind were kind of like so quarantined, it was blooming, it's still blooming. So how do I document that there's been a light transition, that there's flowers, that there's new smells, that in fact life does continue, and feeling connected to that. Part of documenting as well has been Whitney, and there's another one, Brittany, and the cats that have been supporting me throughout this process, and them saying, why are you here? Why aren't you at work? Let me alone. So that's one piece. The other piece, and that's where Ted actually had it before, is on that map. I am part of a community of organizers, all from the Bronx, all Puerto Rican. We're called Bronx Mobile. We are street-based harm reduction. And what we've been doing since 2018 is providing syringes, naloxone, harm reduction kits, condoms, lube, food, juice, and compassion and love to folks who live on the streets, who are housing insecure and also actively using drugs. And so from the very beginning that I started doing this work with Bronx Mobile, I have resisted and have taken very little pictures of either us doing the work or of the community. But what I have been very consistent in is documenting the maps of travel throughout the Bronx, because they provide a temporal as well as a geographic snapshot of need. And part of the hypotheses that we have within Bronx Mobile is that as gentrification continues to roll through New York City, it will continue to roll through the Bronx, specifically south to north, because the south is closest to Manhattan. So in some ways, the map becomes a documentation of our work, of our love for our community, but also of where there's need and where in fact society in New York City has failed its residents. And COVID-19 meant, can I do Bronx Mobile? Can Alexis Del Rio and Nelson Gonzalez and Alicia Rodriguez and the other volunteers, can we actually continue to do this work? And we quickly realized that although physical distancing and social solidarity were paramount, that in fact continuing to support our folks was also paramount. So we quickly figured out that we needed to just get masks and gloves and hand sanitizer and figure out a way to do it, because this work, this activism work, is what speaks to my soul, and I needed to continue it. So we shifted it, right? We went from vehicle to walkabouts, where we would literally walk around. 2 miles back and forth is where there's a couple of encampments about a mile from where I live. So let me just walk it. So I may not be able to carry with me 2,000 syringes, but I can carry 100 in my backpack, as well as juice boxes, food and water, and also touch base and have a neighborhood walk, neighborhood sidewalk conversation around, what do you need? What can I do for you? Here are the resources that I know about. And guess what? I'll be back in 2 days. So we've continued to do that. And so for me, what I would say under COVID-19 and being part of the What Would an HIV Doula Do, as Ted said earlier, we didn't touch base with each other, the collective members, but it was almost like we immediately started doing what we each do. And so for me, the harm reduction piece, street-based with Puerto Ricans, with the Latino community, with migrants, was super duper important. And we just kind of rolled with it and did it. So yeah, so COVID-19 for me has been not so much about journaling, but about photographing, doing kind of like capturing an image versus a written word, what the experience has been like for me and for my community. Thank you.